Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of my video blog series. I'm your host, Nick Renard, and today we are going to be talking about choosing the best remarketing ads, mainly for your AdWords campaigns, although obviously you can use remarketing on other platforms like AdRoll and Bing and whatnot, but we'll be talking today primarily about AdWords. So, I wanted to start with kind of a recap on remarketing in general for people who may have a little experience, but just want to kind of get the basics down as well. The concept of remarketing is following users that have previously visited your site with ads that entice them to come back to your website and convert. So what we're trying to do is, it's exactly that, obviously, is people who have been to the site before and have left, we're trying to get those customers to come back, to get reinterested in the website and come back and do whatever it is that you want them to do on your site that makes your business more money. So if you guys are interested in phone calls, or you're interested in quote forms, or whatever it is, whatever your lead is, that's what we're trying to do, is to get those people back into the funnel and to get them to buy something from you, products, services, whatever. So there's two types of ads that we can create with remarketing. One is an image ad, which we'll be talking mostly about images today. Uh, so you can the other side of it is you can also add text ads to any given campaign that you can use for remarketing. And we've uploaded text ads for a lot of our clients in the past. I will say that about it's a pretty big chunk. I'd say about 90% of the time, image ads will outperform text ads, assuming they're kind of running the same copy. For whatever reason, image ads just do better in my experience. It's something you can test if you want to test it, but I recommend just staying focused around image ads. Most of the time that we have people upload text ads is because we are having issues getting the images created. So yes, if you have someone to design your images for you, then I recommend just sticking to those. But yeah, that is an option. Uh, so that those are the types of images that we can create. So when we create a remarketing campaign, we obviously are creating these images to advertise to people. But the other side of the coin there is, who are we advertising those images to? And we call that an audience. And so there's a few different types of audiences that we can use. The typical audience that's used in most campaigns that I've run is the default of just advertising to anyone who has ever visited the site ever. And we call that the all users list. Now, it's not necessarily right or wrong to be advertising to all users. It's something that you need to test, and it's also dependent on your traffic density. For example, if your all users list has tens of thousands, just way too many users, for, like, if you, let's say your budget is limited, like you only have $30 a day to spend on remarketing, then all users may not be the most viable list, because you'd want to narrow that down a little more and try to focus in on the users that are maybe more likely to convert. So the second option that I have here on this list is custom tailored lists. So what you can do is, within analytics and even AdWords, you can set up lists to only advertise to users who have had some sort of specific behavior on your website. So one of the ones that we've used a lot in the past is people that have spent a certain amount of time on the site. So we can advertise to users who have spent more than, let's say 30 seconds on the site. So they showed at least some level of interest. They didn't immediately click back after they landed on your pages, but instead, maybe they read through some stuff, clicked around, but didn't necessarily decide to buy today. But we're going to try to bring them back and get them to buy. So that's the idea of custom tailored lists. Usually I use custom tailored lists when I'm trying to narrow a list down. Like I mentioned, if the all users list is too big and your budget's limited, then that's a good idea to kind of get into as well. And then the last option you have here is something called customer match, which is actually something that was introduced relatively recently to Google. It was actually introduced quite a while ago, but they've been starting to ramp up kind of their setup on customer match, and it's just the whole system for it's gotten better as of late. So customer match is where you upload emails of people who, maybe you've gotten a list of emails of people who have submitted forms on your website or signed up for newsletters or things like that. You can use those lists of emails to advertise your image ads to, that same set of users. So that's another form of remarketing that we can do as well. All right, let's move on. That's kind of a basic overview. So let's talk a little bit about the effectiveness of remarketing. And remarketing is similar to what I call billboard advertising. So when you're driving along, the freeway or whatever, and you see a billboard for Coke, it's not like you immediately pull your car over at the next gas station and buy a Coke just because you saw the ad. But it does remind you in your head of, oh yeah, like, Coke, like that's, if I'm thirsty, like that's a beverage, it's essentially reminding you so that the next time that you think about getting a drink and you see things on the menu, Coke is something that's very familiar to you because you see it everywhere. And so that's the idea of billboard advertising, or another word for it would be called like brand awareness or brand advertising. You're essentially just trying to get your name out there. Now, that's not a very good KPI from I guess from some people's standpoint. Some people are very, concerned with brand advertising, and some campaigns are built around it. But some of, in terms of KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. A KPI is, it's essentially trying to tell us how much money we're making from our advertising efforts. So a metric that we would like to use more as a KPI than just, something like impressions would be conversions. So if your remarketing campaign is, I'm going to give an example here. If your remarketing campaign generates 20,000 impressions, well, that's great. 20,000 people saw your ad. But if we don't know how many times those 20,000 people who saw your ad ended up actually buying something from you or actually turning into revenue for your business, then, it could be wasted money. So that's why knowing your KPIs is important, because, one of them could actually lead to money and the other one could just be, kind of nonsense, not very important. So the main thing that we use as a KPI for determining performance is conversions. Make sure that your conversion tracking is set up properly. If you're tracking quote forms or phone calls, make sure that the code on your site and everything like that. And we have blogs about this stuff as well, so feel free to check those out about conversion tracking. Yeah, make sure it's set up properly so that you can know for sure whether or not your advertising efforts are worthwhile in your remarketing campaigns. Another metric that we sometimes look at is something called view-through conversions, which is a column that most people haven't seen before within AdWords. If you can see, there's a little screenshot right here. It says view through conversions. These numbers are not actually calculated into your total conversions within AdWords. In fact, if you leave them hidden and you never activate them, then you will. It's literally its own separate column that is not affected by anything else in AdWords. But what a view through conversion is it's when someone sees the ad, they don't click on it, but they still manage to come back to the site and convert. Now, it's kind of a weird way of looking at it because these remarketing ads are meant to entice users to come back to the site, and when they click on the ad, they are redirected directly to your website. But sometimes what can happen is somebody goes to your website, maybe through a paid ad or whatever, they get populated to your remarketing list, and then for the next month, they keep seeing your ad over and over and over in banner slots on other websites that they're browsing around on. Now, they may never click on one of those ads because they aren't the type of person that clicks on, spammy looking ads, but that message that keeps coming back to them is it's telling them subconsciously to come back to the site. So there's kind of this ghost effect is what I've always called it of view through conversions, on how even though this idea of billboard advertising or brand advertising is it's not necessarily a KPI that we want to focus in on too much, but there is a positive effect that it can have, and view through conversions is one of those things that we can kind of see, okay, how many of these users are seeing the ads, not necessarily clicking them, but still managing to get back to the site and convert. We may not want to give 100% of that credit to the remarketing ads, but I think that we can, it's safe to say that we can give at least partial credit to those remarketing ads trying to entice users to come back to the site. if you go back to the Coke example, if you see a Coke billboard a million times and you only see a Pepsi billboard once, the next time you're deciding between Coke and Pepsi, you're going to be more likely to buy Coke because it's just been ingrained in your subconscious more. And so that's kind of the idea here is that that branding does have an effect on people, so there is some level of value to it. All right. The last thing here is that success rates with remarketing, because people will always ask, well, is remarketing good? Is it profitable? The truth is, if you ask that question, is X profitable? The answer will always, always, always be, it doesn't matter what business you are, it doesn't matter what you do, what product or service you're trying to sell, the answer will always be you have to test and find out. You will not know otherwise. A lot of these strategies may work for you. They may not work for you. They may work for you and not work for competitors. They may not work for you and work for competitors. It's totally dependent on so many moving variables that there's no way to predict it unless you test it and find out. Again, there's things like your landing page, your website, your SEO efforts, how well is your PPC campaign set up, how good is the ad itself. So many variables that the only way to know for sure is to test it and find out. All right, so that's a little bit on the effectiveness of remarketing. Let's move on to how to choose the best remarketing ads. Now again, we can choose image or text ads. I highly recommend you go with image, but you can try text as well if you want. Now within your image ad, you're going to have text. So there's going to be words within your image ad. The general rule of thumb is to use about 10 to 15 words in the ad. You don't want to go too much more than that. There's a couple reasons for that. When people look at a remarketing ad, they aren't going to be reading a wall of text. You want to keep it very short, very simple, very attractive. Just kind of easy to get the point across of what it is that you want them to do. And we're going to go over some examples here in a second, so don't worry about that. The other note I have here is to use less than 20% of the space for words. Now, this is actually a policy that Facebook uses for their remarketing ads. They'll disapprove any ad that has more than 20%. But I actually think that this rule that Facebook uses is a very good rule of thumb in general to use, even on other platforms where that isn't necessarily the policy, where you can use like 80% text. And again, we'll go over some more examples here of that in a sec. So yeah, try to make sure that most of the ad itself is graphics or call to action buttons, things that aren't necessarily involving words. You want most of it to be image. All right, let's move on. So speaking of images, always use high resolution images. When people see the remarketing ad, if it's blurry or if it's not good or if it's cropped weird, it's just a bad first impression. I know it's not technically a first impression since we're remarketing and they've already visited your site, but if that's the first time they're seeing your ad and it just looks like crap, yeah, make sure you're using good images.